You have rights when you go to the polls. Know them. Before you head to the polls, be sure to arm yourself with this information to make sure that your voice is heard this election. Hi, I'm Sophie from Democracy Docket, and today I'm going to break down what rights you have as a voter and what to do if you feel like your rights are being violated. First and foremost, you have the right to privately cast your ballot free from interference or intimidation. It is illegal for anyone to stop you from casting your ballot. An attempt to stop you from voting can come in many different forms: physically blocking you from the entrance of your polling place, threats or taunts, bribery, impersonating poll workers, or telling you that you don't meet the requirements to cast a ballot. During the 2022 midterms, this took the form of armed vigilantes wearing tactical gear, staking out drop boxes and recording voters returning their mail-in ballots via drop boxes in Maricopa County, Arizona. Thankfully, a judge quickly put these efforts to the end and prohibited the group from continuing to engage in these drop box monitoring activities. To stay up to date on cases like this and any new developments that may arise this year, make sure to subscribe to our free newsletters. You can click the link right here on the screen or in the description of this video. While these instances are rare and shouldn't scare you from voting at the polls, it is important to raise awareness if you witness these behaviors.
First of all, don't let them win. Don't let them prevent you from voting. You have a right. You have a constitutional right. You have a right protected by federal law and state law to cast your ballot and have that ballot counted. So insist that you are able to vote and that you cast your ballot, and sort of tune out all of the negativity that's around you. So that's number one. Number two, if you see something, say something. If you feel like you are subject to voter intimidation, or you see someone else being intimidated by voters, call it to the attention of the local election officials, the people working at the polls. If they're not dealing with it properly, if you don't feel like they have it under control, then bring it to the attention of law enforcement, because we cannot have a system in this country in which voters feel unsafe in the voting process. It is one of the most sacred parts of our democracy. So stand up for your rights. If you see something, say something, and insist that every voter be allowed to vote.
Remember, federal law prohibits voter intimidation. Enacted in 1965, Section 11B of the Voting Rights Act outlaws any act that is likely to intimidate voters. No person, whether acting under color of law or otherwise, shall intimidate, threaten, coerce, or attempt to intimidate, threaten, or coerce any person for voting or attempting to vote. The provision extends the same protections to anyone urging or aiding another individual to vote.
You hope that there are consequences for people who are engaged in voter intimidation or voter suppression. You hope that this is something that the state laws and the federal laws can deliver not just a deterrent to, but also punish people who violate them. And in some instances, that has been true. There are instances of criminal prosecutions of people who've engaged in voter intimidation and harassment. There are cases of people being sued for those activities. But I can't promise everyone that every act of voter intimidation or harassment is going to lead to the kind of consequences that, frankly, it should in a democracy. But it is important, whether it does or it doesn't, that you exercise your right to vote and that you bring it to the attention of election officials or law enforcement so that there can be consequences, because we cannot turn a blind eye to people who are engaged in voter suppression or harassment.
So as Mark said, if you feel that someone is trying to prevent you or someone else at your polling location from voting, please bring it to the awareness of the officials at your polling location and call the Election Protection Hotline at 866-OUR-VOTE, or by reporting it directly to the Justice Department at civilrights.justice.gov, or by this number right here. Those links and numbers will also be linked in the description below. Secondly, you have the right to stay in line. This is one that you might hear all the time, but if you are still in line to vote and the polls close, stay in line. You still have the right to cast your ballot. If anyone tells you otherwise, stay put and call the Election Protection Hotline. You have the right to receive assistance. If you're a voter with a disability or you have trouble reading, writing, or understanding English, you have the right to receive in-person assistance at the polls. Section 208 of the Voting Rights Act guarantees this, reading any voter who requires assistance to vote by reason of blindness, disability, or inability to read or write may be given assistance by the person of the voter's choice. But that hasn't stopped Republican-led states from passing a slew of laws restricting or even criminalizing certain types of voter assistance. These anti-voter voter laws are currently being challenged in court in Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi, Missouri, and Ohio. Thankfully, a judge recently blocked part of the new Alabama law, saying that it violated Section 208 of the VRA. As a result, voters with disabilities, voters who are blind, and voters with low literacy will continue to be allowed to receive assistance when applying for absentee ballots for the November election. The deadline to request a ballot online in Alabama is Tuesday, October 29th. Similarly, you have the right to an accessible polling place. In accordance with federal law, all polling places must be accessible for elderly voters and voters with disabilities. If a polling place is not accessible, voters who require assistance must be provided with an alternate means of voting. This also includes having access to voting devices that are compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. You have the right to a paper ballot. Every election, there are reported instances of voting machines or other voting equipment breaking down. If this were to happen at your polling place while you were there, you have the right to ask for a paper ballot to ensure you can still cast your vote. Under no circumstances should broken machines prevent you from voting. Despite debunked conspiracy theories peddled by former President Donald Trump and his allies, voting machines go through rigorous testing to ensure both security and accuracy. However, just like any other piece of technology, they may experience technical issues. That does not mean that there has been any foul play by state or local election officials. During the 2022 midterm elections in Maricopa County, for example, there were issues with ballot tabulation machines at a number of precincts, sparking conspiracy theories from then gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake, who claimed that the issues were intentional. An independent investigation found that the length and weight of the ballots caused the issues, and the county vowed that despite the technical issues, every legal ballot was counted. You have the right to a replacement ballot. If you discover that you have made a mistake or you wish to change your voting choices, you have the right to immediately ask a poll worker for a new ballot. In most instances, you have the right to cast a regular ballot, not a provisional ballot. If someone at the polls questions your eligibility and says that you must vote on a provisional ballot, you should first ask them why you are not eligible to cast a regular ballot. Ask the poll worker to double check for your name on the list of registered voters. Make sure that they're spelling your name correctly. You might be registered at a different precinct. If you know that you're at the right polling location but you're still being questioned, call the Election Protection Hotline. Depending on the state, you may be able to cast your ballot at a different precinct than your assigned one. Arizona, for example, requires counties to allow voters who go to the wrong precinct the ability to use a voting device programmed with the ballot styles for every precinct in the county. Pinal County refused to implement this rule and was sued by Secretary of State Adrian Fontes. The judge ruled that Pinal County is violating state law by not allowing out-of-precinct voting, but did not order the county to change its policy since it's too close to the election. This is why it's crucially important to 1, double check your registration status, and 2, confirm your polling place before you head to the polls. Where you voted during the last general election or even during the primaries this year may not be your assigned polling place for this election. Check before you go. But if you are being told that you are not eligible, ask for a provisional ballot. You have the right to cast a provisional ballot even if election workers cannot find your name on the list of registered voters. Provisional ballots will only be counted if election officials can confirm your eligibility. If you are handed a provisional ballot, make sure to carefully read the instructions on the ballot and any materials you receive. The instructions differ depending on your state, so make sure to ask for information on what steps you need to take and how you can confirm that your ballot was counted. Provisional ballots are at the forefront of a Republican lawsuit in a certain Pennsylvania county. RNC wanted to block voters in Butler County, which is just outside of Pittsburgh, from being able to cast a provisional ballot if their mail-in ballot was rejected because it was missing an inner secrecy envelope, something that's known as a naked ballot. Thankfully, a state appeals court judge ruled against the RNC, which means that voters in Butler County whose mail-in ballots were rejected for envelope errors can still vote provisionally at the polls. This case is now before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. With all of this, remember that if you run into any issues or if you have any questions, talk to the election workers at your polling place or call the Election Protection Hotline. And please share this video with anyone that you know who is voting at the polls this year to make sure that they know their rights when they vote at the polls. Thanks for watching Democracy Docket. If you want to stay up to date on the latest voting and election news in the courts, make sure to subscribe to our newsletters. You can click the link right here on the screen or in the description of this video. I'm Sophie, and I'll see you next time.